I signed the final document at precisely 3 p.m. on a Thursday afternoon in late September, watching the notary stamp the deed with a satisfaction that felt like champagne bubbles in my chest. The beach house in Laguna Beach was mine, or rather it would be my parents' in exactly 2 weeks on their 35th wedding anniversary, a $380,000, every penny I had saved over the past decade. Working as a senior textile designer for one of the largest manufacturing companies on the West Coast. My apartment in downtown Los Angeles was modest, furnished with thrift store finds and hand-me-downs, but I had never cared about luxury for myself. My parents had sacrificed everything to give my sister Vivian and me a stable childhood. Dad had worked double shifts at the automotive plant while Mom cleaned houses on weekends. They had never owned property, never taken a real vacation, never indulged in anything beyond necessities. This house, with its whitewashed exterior and ocean views, was my way of saying thank you for 35 years of putting us first. I had discovered the property almost by accident 6 months earlier, while visiting a college friend who lived in the area. The house sat on a quiet street 3 blocks from the beach, a 2-bedroom cottage with a wraparound porch and a garden that desperately needed attention. The elderly owner had passed away, and her children wanted a quick sale. I had toured it alone on a Saturday morning, imagining my parents sitting on that porch with their morning coffee, finally able to rest. The financing had been brutal. I had liquidated my retirement account, taken a second mortgage on my condo, and worked overtime for 6 months straight. My boss had noticed my exhaustion, and offered me a promotion that I turned down because it would have required relocating to Seattle. I needed to stay close, needed to see my parents enjoy this gift. Some dreams are worth the sacrifice. Vivian had always been the difficult one in our family, though no one said it aloud. She was 2 years younger than me, married to a man named Trevor who worked in pharmaceutical sales, and carried himself with the swagger of someone who believed the world owed him recognition. They had 2 children, both under 10, and lived in a sprawling house in Orange County that Trevor never let anyone forget he had purchased without help from his in-laws. Vivian had studied communications in college, but had stopped working after her first child was born. She spent her days managing Pinterest boards and complaining about how expensive private school tuition had become. I had never been close to Trevor. He had a way of looking at people that made you feel appraised and found wanting. At family dinners, he would dominate conversations with stories about his sales numbers and golf handicap, barely pausing to let anyone else speak. Vivian seemed to shrink in his presence, her voice growing softer, her opinions mattering less. I had watched this transformation over the 8 years of their marriage and said nothing, because families learn to swallow discomfort rather than cause scenes. My parents adored Vivian's children, and I understood why she held a special place in their hearts. She called them daily, visited every weekend with the kids, created the appearance of closeness that I, childless and career-focused, could never quite match. I had accepted my role as the dependable daughter, the one who helped with bills and medical expenses, while Vivian provided grandchildren and Sunday dinners. The anniversary party was scheduled for October 14th, a Saturday. I had planned every detail meticulously, reserving a private room at their favorite Italian restaurant, coordinating with relatives who would drive in from Arizona and Nevada, arranging for a photographer to capture the moment when I handed them the deed. I had even commissioned a custom frame for the house key engraved with their wedding date and the words "Home Sweet Home" in elegant script. I kept the gift secret from everyone except my best friend Sophia, who had helped me research real estate lawyers and title companies. Sophia worked as an architect and understood the significance of home ownership in a way that my other friends, mostly fellow designers and artists, did not. She had looked at me with tears in her eyes when I showed her the closing documents. "You're incredible," she had said, squeezing my hand across the coffee shop. "Your parents are so lucky to have you." I had smiled, feeling the warmth of anticipation. I imagined my mother's face when she saw the ocean from the living room window. Imagined my father finally able to stop worrying about rent increases and landlord inspections. This gift would change their lives in ways that money alone never could. The lawyer I had hired, a sharp woman named Patricia, who specialized in real estate transactions, had been thorough about the paperwork. She had included a clause in the deed transfer that required my written consent for any future sale or transfer of the property. I had added this protection almost as an afterthought, thinking vaguely about tax implications and estate planning, never imagining I would need it for any other reason. The week before the anniversary party felt endless. I threw myself into work, finalizing designs for our spring collection and attending production meetings that stretched past 8:00 p.m., my supervisor, a demanding perfectionist named Gloria, had been pushing the entire team hard as we prepared for our presentation to international buyers. I welcomed the distraction, though my mind kept drifting to the beach house and whether my parents would cry when they saw it. Vivian called me on Wednesday evening, her voice bright with false enthusiasm. "Charlotte, I heard you're planning something special for Mom and Dad's anniversary. You're so thoughtful." Trevor and I wanted to contribute, but you know how expensive everything is with the kids' activities. "Maybe we can bring wine." I had felt a flicker of irritation but pushed it away. "Don't worry about it. Just having everyone together will be perfect. You're always so generous," she had said, and something in her tone made my stomach tighten, though I could not identify why. Dad mentioned, "You've been working a lot of overtime. Are you doing okay financially?" The question had felt intrusive, a probe into territory that was none of her concern. "I'm fine, just busy with the new collection launch." We had talked for a few more minutes about logistics and menu preferences before ending the call. I had stood in my kitchen afterward, staring at my phone and wondering why every conversation with my sister felt like a performance. Words carefully chosen to maintain a facade of sisterly affection that neither of us truly felt. Saturday arrived with perfect Southern California weather, clear skies and temperatures in the mid-70s. I dressed carefully in a navy dress I had bought specifically for the occasion, simple but elegant, and drove to my parents' apartment building with the framed key on the passenger seat and a folder containing all the property documents in my trunk. The restaurant was decorated with silver and white balloons. Photographs from my parents' wedding displayed on easels around the room. Aunts and uncles milled around with champagne flutes, their voices warm with reminiscence. My father, still broad-shouldered at 63, despite the gray in his hair, embraced me with the strength of a man who had spent his life doing physical labor. My mother, petite and elegant in a lavender dress, kissed both my cheeks and whispered that I looked beautiful. Vivian arrived 20 minutes late with Trevor and the children, apologizing breathlessly about traffic, while Trevor checked his phone with barely concealed boredom. The kids ran immediately to their grandparents, and I watched my parents light up with the kind of joy that grandchildren uniquely provide. I felt a pang of something that might have been envy or regret, but I pushed it down. I had chosen my path, and I was proud of what I had accomplished. Dinner was magnificent. Courses of antipasti and handmade pasta, stories and laughter flowing as freely as the wine. I waited until dessert had been served, until the room had settled into contentment before standing and tapping my glass for attention. The conversations died down, all eyes turning to me. "Mom, Dad," I began, my voice steadier than I felt inside. 35 years ago, you made a commitment to each other and to the family you would build. You've given Vivian and me everything, your time, your love, your sacrifice. You've never asked for anything in return, never complained about how hard you worked to give us opportunities you never had. My mother's eyes were already glistening, and my father reached for her hand. I continued, my throat tight with emotion. I wanted to give you something that represents security and peace, something you've earned 1,000 times over. So today, I'm giving you a house. A beach house in Laguna Beach, fully paid for in your names. A place where you can finally rest, where you can watch the ocean and know that you never have to worry about housing again. The room erupted. My mother stood and rushed to me, sobbing while my father followed more slowly, his weathered face crumpling with emotion. Relatives cheered and applauded. Someone took photographs as I handed my parents the framed key and the folder of documents. My mother kept repeating, "I can't believe it." Through her tears, and my father, a man who rarely showed emotion, wiped at his eyes with the back of his hand. Vivian hugged me too, though her embrace felt perfunctor, and Trevor shook my hand with a grip that was slightly too firm, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. "That's very generous of you," he said, his tone impossible to read. "Very generous indeed." We stayed at the restaurant until nearly midnight, the celebration expanding as news of the gift spread through conversations. My parents could not stop talking about the house, asking questions about the neighborhood and the layout, making plans to visit it the following weekend. I basked in their happiness, feeling vindicated in every sacrifice I had made. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of work and planning. My parents visited the beach house 3 times, each visit generating excited phone calls where they described details I already knew. The built-in bookshelves, the vintage tile in the bathroom, the lemon tree in the backyard. They had already started talking about renovations, small improvements they wanted to make, and I encouraged every idea. This was their home now, their canvas to shape however they wished. I had arranged for a moving company to help them transport their belongings on the first weekend of November. They were giving up their apartment, finally escaping the landlord who had raised their rent twice in 3 years. My father had already given notice at work, planning to retire early now that housing costs were no longer a burden. Everything was unfolding exactly as I had imagined. Vivian had been unusually silent after the anniversary party. She had sent a brief text thanking me for organizing such a beautiful event, but we had not spoken beyond that. I had been too busy to notice the absence of her usual weekly check-in calls, too focused on wrapping up projects at work before taking a few days off to help my parents settle into their new home. On the Friday before the move, my mother called me at work, her voice strained in a way that immediately set off alarms. "Charlotte, honey, can you come over tonight? There's something we need to discuss. Is everything okay? Is Dad all right?" "He's fine. We're both fine. We just need to talk to you about something important." I had left work early, anxiety building in my chest during the 40-minute drive to their apartment. When I arrived, both my parents were sitting at their small kitchen table, their expressions serious. The moving boxes stacked against the walls seemed suddenly ominous. "What's wrong?" I asked, sitting down across from them. "Did something happen with the house?" My father cleared his throat, uncomfortable in a way I had rarely seen. "Charlotte, we need to talk about Vivian and Trevor. They've been having some financial difficulties." The statement hung in the air like smoke. I waited, my hands folded on the table, saying nothing. My mother jumped in, her words tumbling over each other. "Trevor's company downsized their sales force, and he's been making much less commission. They're struggling with their mortgage, and Vivian is worried they might lose the house. The kids would have to change schools, and it would be so disruptive for them." I felt something cold settle in my stomach. "I'm sorry to hear that, but what does this have to do with the beach house?" My parents exchanged a glance and I saw the guilt written across both their faces. My mother reached across the table as if to take my hand, but I pulled back. "They need help," my father said quietly. "And we have this beautiful house that you gave us, much bigger than we need. We thought we discussed it with Vivian and Trevor, and we all agreed it would be best if they moved into the beach house. They need it more than we do right now." The words did not make sense at first. I heard them individually but could not assemble them into coherent meaning. "You're giving away the house I bought you." "Not giving away," my mother said quickly. "We're still the owners, but they'll live there. Take care of it. We'll visit on weekends. It's still ours technically." I repeated the word bitter on my tongue. "I spent $380,000, money I saved for 10 years to give you security. And you're handing it to Vivian and Trevor. Their family," my father said, his voice carrying the weight of finality that had ended arguments throughout my childhood. "Family helps family. You of all people should understand that. You've always been the one we could count on to be reasonable." Reasonable. The word I had heard my entire life. The expectation that had shaped every decision I had ever made. Be reasonable, Charlotte. Be responsible. Be the one who sacrifices so everyone else can be comfortable. "Have you already told them?" I asked, my voice flat. My mother nodded, tears in her eyes. Vivian was so relieved, she cried. "Charlotte, she said you were saving their family. Trevor is already making arrangements to move their things next week." I stood up, my chair scraping against the linoleum floor. "I need to go." "Please don't be upset," my mother pleaded. "This doesn't change what you did for us. We're so grateful and we'll still use the house. It's just that right now Vivian needs it more." I walked to the door without responding. My vision blurred with tears I refused to let fall in front of them. I heard my father call my name, but I did not turn around. I drove home in a daze, my mind spinning with disbelief and rage that felt like acid in my chest. I sat in my apartment that night with a bottle of wine I did not drink, staring at the city lights through my window, and feeling the betrayal settle into my bones like frost. The house that was supposed to represent love and gratitude had become a weapon used to demonstrate yet again that my needs, my sacrifices, my feelings were secondary to Vivian's comfort. I had drained my savings, mortgaged my future, worked myself to exhaustion, and in return I had been labeled unreasonable for daring to feel hurt. The next morning, I called Patricia, the real estate lawyer who had handled the transaction. She answered on the third ring, her voice professionally pleasant until she heard the tension in mine. "Charlotte, what's going on?" I explained the situation in clinical terms, keeping my emotions locked down through sheer force of will. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. "Do you have the deed in front of you?" she asked finally. I retrieved it from my file cabinet and read her the relevant clauses. She made a small noise of satisfaction. The covenant is clear. Any transfer of the property, whether through sale, gift, or change of primary residence, requires your written consent. Your parents cannot legally allow your sister and her husband to take occupancy without your approval. What are my options? You can enforce the covenant. If they've already allowed your sister to move in without your consent, you have grounds to rescind the entire gift and reclaim the property. The house would revert to your ownership. The possibility hung in the air between us, tempting and terrible. And if I did that, your parents would be removed as owners. You would own the house outright again. They would have no legal claim to it. I thanked her and ended the call, my hands shaking. The nuclear option. The choice that would blow apart whatever remained of my family relationships. I sat with the possibility for hours, weighing consequences and alternatives, trying to find a path that did not involve burning every bridge I had spent 35 years building. By Sunday afternoon, I had talked myself into going to the beach house to see the situation for myself before making any decisions. Maybe there had been a misunderstanding. Maybe my parents had exaggerated the arrangements. Maybe I could still salvage this without destroying everything. I drove to Laguna Beach, my stomach churning with anxiety and anger. The house looked exactly as it had during my last visit. The garden slightly more tended, the porch swept clean. I parked on the street and walked up the front path, noticing the SUV in the driveway that I recognized as Trevor's. My hands were clammy as I knocked on the door. Vivian opened it, her expression flickering from surprise to something that might have been guilt before settling into defensive brightness. "Charlotte, we weren't expecting you. Come in, come in." I stepped inside and felt my breath catch. Moving boxes were stacked everywhere, labeled with marker in Vivian's handwriting. Kids' toys were scattered across the living room floor. Trevor's golf clubs leaned against the wall near the entrance. The house that I had imagined as my parents' sanctuary had been transformed into Vivian's new home, with a speed that suggested this had been planned long before my parents had bothered to tell me. Trevor emerged from what had been designated as the master bedroom. Wiping his hands on his jeans, he saw me and smiled. That same calculating expression I had always disliked. "Charlotte, perfect timing. We were just moving the last of the furniture. Your sister's been working so hard to get everything organized." "I can see that," I said, my voice carefully neutral. "Where are Mom and Dad?" "They came by this morning to see how we're settling in," Vivian said quickly. "They brought coffee and pastries. It was sweet. They're so excited to have us here." I looked around the room, taking in every detail. Children's artwork was already taped to the refrigerator. Vivian's decorative pillows were arranged on the couch I had left for my parents. Trevor's expensive sound system was being installed in the corner where I had imagined my father would set up his reading chair. "This happened fast," I observed. "You've already moved everything in." Trevor shrugged, his confidence bordering on arrogance. "When opportunity knocks, you don't waste time. Your parents were generous enough to offer us the house. And honestly, it's perfect for us. Much better location than Orange County, better schools for the kids. We're probably going to put our old place on the market." Something crystallized in that moment, a clarity that cut through confusion and doubt. This had never been about temporary help or financial difficulties. This was a permanent takeover, executed with the kind of efficiency that suggested Trevor had been planning it from the moment I had announced the gift at the anniversary party. "So, you're moving in permanently?" I said, not a question. "Well, your parents still own it legally," Vivian said, avoiding my eyes. "But they agreed it makes more sense for us to live here. They don't need this much space, and honestly, Charlotte, we really needed this. Trevor's been under so much pressure, and the kids deserve stability." I nodded slowly, a plan forming in my mind with diamond-edged precision. "You're right. The kids deserve stability. How wonderful that it worked out so perfectly." Trevor's smile widened, misinterpreting my calm as acceptance. "See, Vivian, I told you Charlotte would understand. She's always been the reasonable one in the family." He moved closer, draping an arm over my shoulder with a familiarity that made my skin crawl. "You gave this house to your parents, and they're giving it to us. That's how family works. This is our property now, fair and square." I looked at him, memorizing his smug expression, the absolute certainty in his eyes that he had won. "I'm happy for you both," I said, extracting myself from his grip. "Really, congratulations on your new home." Vivian's relief was palpable. "Thank you for being so understanding. I know this isn't what you planned, but it means everything to us. The kids are going to love growing up near the beach." I made appropriate small talk for another 10 minutes, asking questions about their moving timeline and complimenting Vivian's decorating choices. I played the role of the supportive sister so convincingly that Trevor offered to show me the renovations they were planning. pulling up designs on his phone with enthusiasm. I admired everything, agreed with every suggestion, and left with a smile that felt like broken glass in my mouth. I drove directly from the beach house to Patricia's office, not caring that it was Sunday evening. She had given me her personal cell number, telling me to call anytime if I needed legal advice about the property. When I explained what I had just witnessed, she told me to come to her home office immediately. Patricia lived in a Spanish-style house in Pasadena, her home office a converted sunroom filled with law books and African violets. She poured us both coffee and listened without interruption as I described the scene at the beach house, my voice steady despite the rage burning in my chest. "They've taken full occupancy," she said when I finished. "That's a clear violation of the covenant. You have every right to enforce it." "What exactly would that look like?" She pulled out a legal pad and began sketching the process. "I'll file a notice of violation with the county recorder's office that officially documents that the covenant has been breached. Simultaneously, I'll send certified letters to your parents, your sister, and her husband informing them that they have 72 hours to vacate the property or face legal action to enforce your ownership rights. And if they refuse, then we file for immediate enforcement in civil court. Given that you have documentary evidence of the covenant and photographic proof of their occupancy, a judge will likely rule in your favor within days. The property would be returned to your sole ownership, and they would be legally required to leave." The implications were staggering. My parents would lose the house entirely. Vivian and Trevor would be forced out of what they already considered their home. The family would fracture in ways that might never heal. And yet, as I sat in Patricia's sunroom, watching the sunset paint the walls gold, I felt a strange sense of peace. They had made their choice, now I would make mine. "Do it," I said. "File everything tomorrow morning." Patricia nodded, no judgment in her expression. "I'll need you to sign some documents authorizing me to act on your behalf. And Charlotte, once we start this process, there's no easy way to reverse it. You need to be certain." "I'm certain," I said, and I was. The reasonable, accommodating Charlotte, who had spent her life making herself smaller to keep everyone else comfortable, was gone. In her place was someone who understood that sometimes the only way to be treated with respect was to demand it. Consequences be damned. I spent Sunday night drafting an email to my supervisor requesting the following week off for personal reasons. Gloria responded within an hour, granting the time without question. I had never taken unscheduled leave in 7 years with the company. I had earned some flexibility. Monday morning, Patricia called to confirm she had filed all necessary paperwork. The certified letters would be delivered by 5:00 p.m. I drove to a coffee shop near the beach house and waited, my laptop open with a work project I made no progress on. I kept imagining the moment when the letters arrived, when Vivian and Trevor realized that their victory was built on legal quicksand. At 5:47 p.m. my phone rang, Vivian's name on the screen. I let it go to voicemail. 2 minutes later Trevor called, voicemail. Then my mother, her message frantic. "Charlotte, what is this letter? Please call us immediately. There's been some mistake." "No mistake." I thought, deleting the voicemail, just consequences. I returned to the beach house at 7 p.m., parking across the street and walking to the front door with the confidence of someone who owned the property. Because I did, or I would very soon. I knocked firmly, and this time when Vivian opened the door, her face was blotchy with tears. "How could you do this?" she demanded, her voice shrill. "After everything we've been through as a family. May I come in?" I asked pleasantly. "We should probably discuss this." Trevor appeared behind her, his face flushed with anger. "There's nothing to discuss. Your parents gave us this house. We have their permission to be here." I pushed past them into the living room, taking in the moving boxes that had multiplied since yesterday. "Actually, you don't. Not according to the legal covenant that was part of the deed transfer. The covenant that requires my written consent for any change in occupancy. That's insane." Trevor spat. "What kind of person puts restrictions on a gift?" "The kind of person who spent 10 years saving money to buy her parents a home," I replied, my voice ice. "The kind of person who liquidated her retirement and mortgaged her future because she thought she was giving them security. Not giving my sister and her entitled husband a free house." Vivian sank onto the couch, crying harder. "We needed this, Charlotte. We were going to lose our house. The kids would have been devastated. Then you should have asked me directly instead of manipulating our parents into giving you what I bought for them." "Manipulating?" Trevor's laugh was harsh. "Your parents made a choice. They chose to help their daughter who actually needs help instead of the workaholic sister who makes plenty of money and doesn't even have kids." The words were designed to wound, and they did, but I refused to let him see it. "My finances and life choices are none of your concern." What is your concern is that you're currently illegally occupying property that will revert to my ownership within the week. You have 72 hours to remove yourselves and all your belongings, or I'll have you forcibly evicted. You're bluffing, Trevor said, but his voice lacked conviction. I pulled out my phone and showed him a photo of the filed legal documents. I'm not. My lawyer has already submitted everything to the court. Judge review is scheduled for Thursday morning. By Friday, this house will be mine again, and you'll be trespassing. Vivian looked up at me, her eye makeup running down her cheeks. What about Mom and Dad? You're taking away their gift. No, I said quietly. You took away their gift when you convinced them to give it to you. I'm just correcting the mistake. My phone exploded with messages over the next 24 hours. My mother called 17 times. My father left voicemails ranging from angry to pleading. Relatives I had not spoken to in years texted to tell me I was being selfish and cruel. Vivian's friends, people I had never met, sent Instagram messages calling me a heartless monster who was destroying a family over money. I blocked most of them and let Sophia field the rest. She had moved into my apartment temporarily, worried I would crumble under the pressure. Instead, I felt strangely calm, as if a weight I had carried my entire life had finally been lifted. I had spent 3.5 decades being reasonable, and it had earned me nothing but exploitation. I was done. Patricia called Wednesday afternoon with an update. The judge reviewed the case this morning. The covenant is ironclad and your documentation is perfect. She's issuing the order tomorrow. The property will be legally yours by Friday at noon. What about my parents? They'll be removed as title holders. The house will revert to your sole ownership exactly as it was before you gifted it to them. If you choose to gift it to them again in the future, that's your prerogative. But legally they'll have no claim to it. I thanked her and sat in my apartment thinking about choices and consequences. My parents had chosen Vivian. They had taken my gift and given it away without a second thought about how that would make me feel. They had expected me to be reasonable, to accept being treated as an ATM rather than a daughter. And when I had refused to play that role, they had turned the entire family against me. Thursday morning, I drove to the beach house one final time before the legal order was executed. Trevor's SUV was still in the driveway, but when I knocked, no one answered. I tried the door and found it unlocked. Inside, the house was in chaos. Moving boxes were torn open, half-packed. Children's toys littered the floor. A coffee cup sat abandoned on the kitchen counter, still half full. I walked through each room cataloging the damage and disrespect. Nail holes in the walls where Trevor had hung his artwork, scratches on the hardwood floor from dragging furniture, a burn mark on the bathroom counter from someone's curling iron. The house I had lovingly selected and carefully prepared had been treated like a disposable commodity. In the master bedroom, I found a stack of documents on the dresser. Mortgage applications for Trevor and Vivian's Orange County house, marked approved for refinance. Bank statements showing that Trevor had received a promotion 2 months ago, his commission actually increasing rather than decreasing. A printed email from Vivian to her mother-in-law dated 3 weeks before the anniversary party discussing their plan to convince Charlotte's parents to let us use the beach house. The financial difficulties had been a lie. The entire sob story had been manufactured to justify taking what I had given my parents. Trevor and Vivian had seen an opportunity and exploited it with calculated precision, counting on my parents' favoritism and my reputation for being reasonable to ensure I would eventually accept the arrangement. I photographed every document, every piece of evidence of their deception. Then I called Patricia and told her what I had found. That changes things, she said, her voice hard. That's fraud. If they lied to induce your parents to transfer the property rights, that's grounds for a civil suit beyond just enforcing the covenant. You could sue them for damages. I don't want their money, I said. I just want them out of my house. Understood. But keep those documents. You might need them. I left the beach house and drove to a coffee shop where I waited for Patricia's call confirming that the judge had signed the order. It came at 2 p.m. The house was mine. Trevor and Vivian had until 5:00 p.m. to vacate or face arrest for trespassing. At 4:30 p.m., I returned to the beach house with Sophia and a locksmith. The SUV was gone. The front door stood ajar. Inside, the house was empty except for garbage. Torn boxes, packing materials, scattered toys they had not bothered to collect. They had left in a hurry, taking everything they could carry and abandoning the rest. The locksmith changed all the locks while Sophia and I bagged the trash. We worked in silence, the only sounds the clinking of keys and the rustle of garbage bags. When we finished, I stood on the porch and looked at the ocean, visible between the houses across the street. The sun was setting, painting the water gold and pink. Are you okay? Sophia asked, putting her hand on my shoulder. I'm perfect, I said. I meant it. The house was mine. The betrayal was over. I had stood up for myself in a way I had never imagined possible, and I had won. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother. "You've destroyed this family. I hope you're proud of yourself." I deleted the message without responding and turned off my phone. Tomorrow, I would deal with the aftermath. Tonight, I would sit on my porch and watch the ocean and remember that I had value beyond what I could provide for other people. I had learned that gifts with strings attached are not gifts at all, and that sometimes the only way to be treated with respect is to refuse to accept anything less. The revenge was not in taking back the house, though that was satisfying. The revenge was in refusing to be reasonable one more time, in choosing myself over their expectations, in walking away from people who had never valued me as anything more than a resource to be exploited. I had bought myself something far more valuable than a beach house. I had bought myself respect back, and no one could ever take that from me again. The first week after reclaiming the house, I threw myself into restoration. The damage Trevor and Vivian had inflicted was worse than I had initially realized. Beyond the surface scratches and nail holes, they had removed light fixtures and cabinet hardware, presumably to take to their next residence. The garden had been trampled, plants broken where they had carelessly dragged furniture through the side gate. I documented everything with photographs and receipts, building a file that Patricia assured me would be useful if I ever chose to pursue legal action. I had no intention of suing them for damages. The house itself was revenge enough, a constant reminder that their scheme had failed spectacularly, but I kept the records anyway, insurance against whatever came next. My parents called repeatedly during those first days, but I did not answer. Their voicemails evolved from angry demands to tearful pleas to cold silence. My father sent a registered letter to my apartment, formal and distant, explaining that I had broken their hearts and destroyed their trust. My mother sent a card with a religious verse about forgiveness, the implication clear. I was the one who needed to repent. Vivian's communication came through social media, public posts designed to paint me as a villain. She wrote long status updates about family betrayal, about sisters who valued money over relationships, about the trauma her children were experiencing because their aunt had stolen their new home. Her friends flooded the comments with support and condemnation aimed at me. Several relatives shared her posts, adding their own commentary about my selfishness. I read every word with detached interest, marveling at the narrative they had constructed. In their version, I had maliciously tricked my parents with legal fine print, then evicted my struggling sister and her innocent children. There was no mention of Trevor's lies about financial difficulties, no acknowledgement of the fraud they had committed, no recognition that the house had been mine to begin with. Sophia suggested I respond publicly, defend myself, but I refused. The people who mattered knew the truth. Everyone else could believe whatever made them comfortable. I had learned that some battles are won by refusing to fight them, by letting your accusers exhaust themselves, shouting into the void, while you build the life they insisted you did not deserve. The house became my sanctuary. I spent weekends painting walls and refinishing the damaged floors. I replaced the stolen fixtures with better versions, upgraded the kitchen appliances, planted new flowers in the garden. Every improvement felt like reclaiming territory, restoring something that had been violated by people who viewed generosity as weakness. Sophia helped me landscape the backyard, creating a meditation space with a small fountain and comfortable seating. We worked side by side in comfortable silence, and I felt peace settling over me like morning fog. This house, which had begun as a gift for my parents, had become a symbol of something more profound. My refusal to be diminished by people who demanded I make myself smaller for their convenience. 3 weeks after the eviction, I hired a property management company to handle renting the beach house. I had considered selling it, cutting all ties to the painful memories embedded in its walls, but something stubborn in me refused to let Trevor and Vivian's actions drive me away from something I loved. Instead, I would keep it, transform it into a source of income that would rebuild my depleted savings, and occasionally use it myself when I needed to remember why I had stopped being reasonable. The management company found tenants quickly, a young couple who taught at a nearby elementary school, responsible and kind, who promised to care for the house as if it were their own. The rental income covered my mortgage and provided a small surplus. I set up automatic payments to replenish my retirement account, slowly undoing the financial damage of my generosity. In mid-December, my boss Gloria called me into her office. I had been expecting a conversation about my recent distraction, perhaps even a performance warning. Instead, she offered me a promotion I had turned down months earlier, Senior Director of Design, with a substantial raise and the option to work remotely 2 days per week. "You've been different lately," she said, studying me with sharp eyes, more focused, more confident. "Whatever happened in your personal life, it suits you." I accepted the promotion without hesitation, negotiating for an even higher salary than she had initially offered. The old Charlotte would have taken whatever was given, grateful just to be considered. The new Charlotte understood her worth and demanded compensation that reflected it. My first act as senior director was to redesign our company's entire summer collection, incorporating textile patterns inspired by the ocean views from the beach house. The designs were bold and unconventional, a departure from our typically conservative aesthetic. When I presented them to the executive team, I expected pushback. Instead, they approved the collection unanimously, praising my vision and creativity. The collection launched in February to exceptional reviews. Fashion magazines featured my designs in editorial spreads. International buyers increased their orders. My name appeared in industry publications as an innovator, someone pushing boundaries and redefining contemporary textile design. I had never sought recognition, but I found I enjoyed it, not the fame itself, but what it represented. I had refused to shrink, and I had flourished because of it. Vivian's social media presence shifted as winter turned to spring. The angry posts about family betrayal were deleted, replaced by carefully curated photos of her children and inspirational quotes about resilience. She had moved with Trevor to a rental house in San Diego, farther from my parents, but closer to his company's main office. The distance seemed to suit everyone, creating physical space that mirrored the emotional chasm that now divided us. I heard through a cousin that Trevor had been furious about losing the beach house, that he had consulted several lawyers about challenging the covenant, before being told he had no legal standing. The mortgage refinancing they had secured on their Orange County house had been used to cover mounting credit card debt, not to purchase a new home. They had needed the beach house not because they were losing their current residence, but because they had spent beyond their means and needed to eliminate their housing costs to maintain their lifestyle. My parents had moved to a senior apartment complex in Long Beach, a modest 2-bedroom unit subsidized by my father's union pension. They had not asked me for help and I had not offered. We existed in mutual silence, connected by blood, but separated by choices that neither side seemed willing to forgive. In April I received an unexpected letter from my father, not an email or text, but an actual handwritten letter, his careful block print filling 2 pages. "Charlotte," it began, "I have spent months trying to understand what happened, trying to find the words that would fix what we broke. Your mother and I believed we were doing the right thing, helping Vivian when she needed us. We did not understand the covenant you had included in the deed, and we did not think to ask you before making our decision. That was wrong. We treated your gift carelessly, and we hurt you deeply." The letter continued, acknowledging their favoritism toward Vivian, admitting they had allowed Trevor to manipulate them, because they wanted to believe they were helping their grandchildren. He did not ask for forgiveness or suggest reconciliation. He simply stated facts and accepted responsibility, ending with a line that made my hands shake. "You were right to take back the house. We did not deserve it, and we certainly did not deserve you." I read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down my face in a way they had not since the day I discovered Vivian in my beach house. My father had never been good with emotions, had spent my childhood showing love through actions rather than words. This letter represented a vulnerability I had never seen from him, an admission of failure that must have cost him everything. I did not respond immediately. I needed time to process to decide what kind of relationship, if any, I wanted with my parents going forward. But I kept the letter tucked into my desk drawer, a reminder that some people are capable of growth, even when it comes too late to undo the damage. In May, I flew to New York for a textile industry conference where I was scheduled to speak on a panel about innovative design techniques. The event was at a luxury hotel in Manhattan, the ballroom filled with designers and manufacturers from around the world. I wore a suit I had designed myself, fabric printed with abstract waves that echoed the ocean beyond my beach house windows. During my panel, I discussed the importance of protecting your creative vision, of refusing to compromise your aesthetic to please people who did not share your values. I spoke about the risks inherent in bold design choices and the rewards that come from trusting yourself even when everyone around you suggests safer paths. The audience responded enthusiastically, and afterward several attendees approached me with business cards and collaboration proposals. That evening at the conference reception, I met a man named Julian who ran a boutique textile studio in Portland. We talked for hours about design philosophy and the business of art. discovering we had similar views on creative independence and sustainable manufacturing. He was thoughtful and funny, his passion for his work evident in every gesture. When he asked for my number, I gave it without hesitation. We began dating long-distance weekend trips to Portland and Los Angeles that felt effortless in their ease. Julian had been married briefly in his 20s, a relationship that ended amicably when both parties realized they wanted different futures. He had no interest in children, but loved his work with an intensity I recognized. We fit together in a way I had never experienced. Two people who had chosen themselves and found they could choose each other without losing anything essential. By July, Julian had relocated to Los Angeles, moving into a loft downtown that we jokingly called his studio. Though he increasingly spent nights at my apartment, we traveled to the beach house on weekends, the tenants having moved out in June. I had decided not to re-rent immediately, wanting to enjoy the space I had fought so hard to reclaim. Julian loved the house instantly, understanding why I had been willing to sacrifice everything to give it to my parents. We spent long afternoons on the porch, working side by side on our respective projects, comfortable in shared silence. He never asked about the family drama that surrounded the property, accepting my brief explanations without pushing for details I was not ready to share. In late August, nearly a year after the anniversary party that had started everything, I received a phone call from Vivian. I almost declined it, my finger hovering over the reject button before curiosity won out. "Charlotte," she said, her voice small and uncertain. "I know I have no right to call you. I know you probably hate me, but I need to tell you something, and I couldn't do it through a letter or text." I waited, saying nothing. "Trevor and I are getting divorced," she continued. "It's been coming for a while, but I finally filed the papers last week. He's been having an affair with someone from his office for months, maybe longer." I found out because she called the house thinking I already knew. I felt a spike of satisfaction followed immediately by guilt. "I'm sorry you're going through that." "You're not sorry," Vivian said, and she almost laughed. "You never liked him. You were probably right about him from the beginning. I just couldn't see it because I was so desperate to believe I had made the right choice." "What do you want from me, Vivian?" She was quiet for a long moment. "Nothing. I don't want anything. I just wanted you to know that you were right about Trevor, about the house, about all of it. We lied to Mom and Dad about our financial problems. Trevor convinced me it would be fine, that you would understand eventually, that family owed each other support, but it was never about needing the house. Trevor just wanted it because it made him feel successful, like he was beating you somehow." The admission hung between us. Years of resentment and competition finally acknowledged. "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because I've spent this whole year blaming you for destroying our family, telling everyone who would listen that you were cruel and heartless. But I was wrong. You didn't destroy anything. We did when we tried to take something that was never ours." Her voice cracked. "I miss you, Charlotte. I miss my sister. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I wanted you to know that I understand now what I couldn't see before." I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of the year settle over me. Part of me wanted to rage at her, to list every injury and betrayal, to make her feel the depth of pain she had caused. But another part, the part that had learned to choose peace over being right, simply felt tired. "I'm glad you're leaving, Trevor," I said finally. "You deserve better than someone who lies to you and cheats on you. As for us, I don't know if we can ever be what we were, but maybe someday we can figure out what we can be." "That's more than I deserve," Vivian whispered. "Thank you." We ended the call without promises or plans, just the acknowledgement that some damage takes years to repair, if it can be repaired at all. I sat on my porch with Julian beside me, watching the sunset paint the ocean in shades of copper and gold. "Your sister?" he asked, and I nodded. He squeezed my hand and said nothing more, understanding that some conversations need space to breathe before they can be discussed. 2 weeks later, my mother called. Our first conversation in nearly a year was awkward and stilted, filled with long pauses and careful word choices. She asked about my work and my life with a tentative interest that suggested she had finally realized how little she actually knew about me. I answered honestly, but without elaboration, not ready to open myself fully, but willing to crack the door. She told me about my father's health issues, minor but concerning, and about their adjustment to the apartment. She mentioned that Vivian had moved back closer to them with her children, that the divorce was difficult but necessary. She did not apologize for her role in what had happened, but she also did not blame me. It was progress, however incremental. We began talking monthly, brief check-ins that slowly rebuilt the foundation of our relationship. My father wrote occasional letters, updates on his life that never pressured me for more than I was willing to give. They had learned finally that I could not be taken for granted. By October, exactly 1 year after I had taken back the beach house, I stood in the same spot where Trevor had smirked at me and declared the property his. But now the house was filled with my furniture, my art, my vision of what a home should be. Julian and I had decided to split our time between his downtown loft and the beach house, creating two spaces that reflected different aspects of our lives together. The textile collection I had designed had exceeded all sales expectations, earning me recognition from the Fashion Designers Association and a feature in Architectural Digest about homes that inspire creativity. The article included photographs of the beach house, its transformation from neglected cottage to artistic sanctuary documented in glossy pages. My parents called after the article published, my mother's voice thick with emotion as she told me how proud they were, how beautiful everything looked. Vivian sent a text with a screenshot of the article. "You were right. It was always your house. It's perfect now." I looked at the message for a long time before responding simply, "Thank you." The final confrontation came not with drama but with quiet satisfaction. Trevor called me in November, his voice stripped of its characteristic arrogance. He wanted to apologize, he said, for his behavior and his manipulation. He admitted he had been jealous of my success, insecure about his own achievements, desperate to prove he could take something from someone he perceived as having too much. I listened without interrupting, letting him exhaust himself with explanations and excuses. When he finished, I said only, "I hope you learn to build your own life instead of trying to steal someone else's." He hung up without responding, and I deleted his number immediately. I had no interest in his redemption or his regret. The revenge was never about making them suffer, though they had in their own ways. Trevor had lost his marriage and his reputation. Vivian had lost her sister and her illusions about her marriage. My parents had lost the gift they had treated so carelessly. But the real revenge, the lasting revenge, was in what I had gained. I had learned to value myself beyond my utility to others. I had discovered that being reasonable was often just another word for being exploited. I had found love with someone who saw me as an equal, not a resource. I had built a career and a home that reflected my worth, not my willingness to sacrifice for people who would never appreciate it. In the months that followed, Trevor's life unraveled with a completeness that would have satisfied me had I still cared enough to notice. The affair that destroyed his marriage also destroyed his career. His company's ethics policy strictly prohibited relationships between supervisors and subordinates, and when human resources discovered he had been involved with a junior sales representative, they terminated him immediately. Unable to find comparable work in pharmaceutical sales, he took a position with a medical supply distributor at a fraction of his previous salary. His expensive car was repossessed. The Orange County house sold at a loss in a declining market, barely covering their remaining mortgage. Vivian's divorce attorney ensured that Trevor paid substantial child support despite his reduced income. And the financial pressure that he had lied about to steal my beach house became his genuine reality. He moved to a studio apartment in the Inland Empire, over an hour from his children. His golf club sold to make rent. The man who had declared my gift his property now worked weekends as a retail clerk to supplement his income, his arrogance replaced by the exhaustion of consequences he had spent his life avoiding. As for me, I never stopped working hard, but I stopped working for other people's approval. The beach house remained mine, a testament to the power of standing up for yourself, even when everyone around you demands you stay small. Sometimes on quiet mornings, I stood on the porch with my coffee and watched the ocean, remembering the woman who had signed those documents, believing she was buying her parents' happiness. I did not regret that woman's generosity, but I was grateful I was no longer her. The revenge journey had taught me that protecting yourself is not selfish, it is survival. And sometimes the most radical act of love you can offer the world is refusing to let it diminish you.